welcome to Krista Paints a Masterpiece. Today's masterpiece that I'm going to be painting is the girl with the pearl earring. That would have been much better if I actually had a pearl earring, but alas, I do not have pierced ears. But that doesn't matter. It's still going to be a very, very nice painting. And I do actually have something in common with the girl with the pearl earring. Can you see what it would be? That's right. Lack of eyebrows. She has almost no eyebrows. Have you noticed that? It's real weird. Don't know why she has no eyebrows. Anyway, I have lack of eyebrows as well, which makes it a really good reason for me to be painting this picture. I'm going to be painting it today in watercolors. Let's talk about my materials. This is my palette. That's the best way to frame my palette, surely. Today I will be using this color and this color and this color and this color. Actually, I can't see what colors I'm pointing at. Nope, not using any of those colors. I'll be using this color though. This is Pyrrole Red. I'll be using this one. This is Burnt Sienna. I'll be using this one, Ultramarine Blue. And I'll be using quite a lot of this one. This is Quinacridone Gold. It's a very, very beautiful color. So that is 4 colors that I will be using for this painting, and 4 colors only. I will not be using white. No white. Some people use white in their paintings. Some people use white in their watercolor paintings. I sometimes use white in my watercolor paintings, but this time it will be pure, transparent watercolor and nothing else. Let me show you my brushes. Boom, brush number 1. This one is a very pointy brush. I do like the pointiness of this brush. If only I could draw some eyebrows on for myself with these. Number 2, boom, also very pointy. I mean, pretty similar to this one really, but slightly bigger. Then we also have this one. This one is more fuzzy, but also relatively pointy. Most of my brushes are pointy. That's all I'm saying. And then, last thing for us to have a little look at, while my brushes fall on the floor, there's a kid outside screaming, don't know why, is my tubes of paint. So I mentioned before the colors that I will be using. Whoops, I've already taken them out. Tubes of colors I will be using. Boom, number 1, Pyrrole Red. Boom, number 2, Burnt Sienna. Number 3, Quinacridone Gold. And number 4, Ultramarine Blue. Are we ready to go? I'm ready to go. Are you ready to go? I'm ready to go. You ready to go? I'm ready to go. You ready to go? I'm ready to go! Let's do this! Now I'm in a tiny little box up here. I'm going to be talking about my painting process, so let's get into it. What we are looking at right now is called a wet in wet wash. A wet in wet wash. Not just fun to say, fun to do. Actually quite difficult to do. So a wet and wet wash, oh, it is so much fun to say, means that you wet the paper down first and then you have wet pigment that you're putting onto the wet paper. This is probably the most unpredictable style of watercolor out of most of the sort of common techniques, because the wet pigment does whatever the heck it likes all over the wet paper. It spreads everywhere, it has lovely soft edges, but it's very uncontrollable. Moving on now to a little bit of dark accent detail. Start off with putting in a light wash, which gives me just sort of the general colour setup. And then I'll start to put in some of the mid-tones. The mid-tones. So she's looking a little bit like a robot at the moment. I feel like I heard myself thinking that because now I have softened some of the edges. The colours that I've been using at this point are the colours that I mentioned a couple of times. Pyrrole Red and the Quinacridone Gold are the base for most of the colours that I use on the face, but you can also see some of the ultramarine in there, the ultramarine in her head cloth scarf covering. Now coming in very strong with the Pyrrole Red into the mouth, but also trying to soften the mouth off. I don't want it to be a really hard edge. Quite a lot of working with watercolours, particularly doing portraits, is trying to manage edges. Trying to think about how do I soften this edge, how do I leave this edge hard. Blending is quite tricky in watercolours. There's a certain stage of a watercolour painting that I think of as being the awkward teen stage, in the sense that it will not stop fighting you and everything's going wrong. You can kind of feel the painting slamming its door on you and saying, "Leave me alone!" It's often in these earlier stages when you're just working in the mid-tones, everything's patchy, you know, she's got all sorts of blemishes all over her face. It's really tough stuff. But the beauty part of watercolour is that you keep working and you keep working and you keep working and you keep working, and eventually she flourishes from being an extremely ugly painting into a beautiful portrait. Now this is quite fun, working on the eye. It's quite satisfying. I feel like this is when it starts to get away from being an awkward teen, is when you get in that really strong eye colour and you really get a feeling for how the light is coming into the iris. Because I've started putting in some dark accents, now I'm going to keep working on the dark accents. So trying to build up a bit more mid-tone, moving towards shadow. This picture is very subtle, so there's actually not a lot of really, really dark, big kind of areas. It's lots of little teeny tiny accents. It's a very small brush I'm using. It's a tiny brush. It's a brush size 0. I have it here. It's a 0. That's so small. It's so small when it gets near my face, it almost disappears. Very occasionally you might see me blending by lifting off or wiping off. So putting down a bit of colour, and then while it's still wet, using the brush, sometimes a cloth, to just sort of soften that edge. But it's really just on the edge, just on the edge of the edge. Because otherwise, if you go too far in, you'll lose all of your colour. If you go too far out, you take the colour too far. So you've got to find that balance. I feel like I'm coming in quite dramatically dark at this point over the side of her face. I mean, are we going to leave it like that, Krista? Is it really that dark? I don't know. I don't think so. It's alright. Watercolours always dry lighter. They're like a marshmallow? I don't know what that means. They're like a marshmallow. They always dry lighter. No, watercolours do soften over time. They certainly do dry lighter, which is different to acrylics. Acrylics always dry darker. So that's just a little take-home piece of information. You should just fold that up and pop that in your pocket. I'm working on the pearl now. The thing about reflective objects, you put the highlight right next to the shadow. And a reflective object is reflecting whatever is around it. So the reflective pearl earring is reflecting the light that's coming in from one side of the face, and it's also reflecting her shirt, and it's reflecting her hair, it's reflecting lots of things around her. So that's the key to shiny objects. Highlight right next to the shadow, the mid-tone on the other side, and reflects what's around it. Starting to work into the headpiece now. I don't really know what to call it. Headscarf, headpiece. Very nice fascinator. It's not a fascinator. This is all just about working up the tones. So making sure that everything sits comfortably together. And softening edges. Softening edges, always. Put in some colour, soften that edge. Put in more colour, soften that edge. Nope, soften it. It's not soft enough. It needs to go softer. Quite a lot of the time too, because you're sort of working from light to dark, often you end up with something that is much too light and you don't realize until you put some dark in there, and then as soon as you put the dark in you think, oh boy, this is all too light. So there's a fair amount of working over again and again the same areas. You do that quite a lot. Alright, we're coming in with the background now. The background is wet in wet again. And you can see sort of working, first off working big and broad, and then getting smaller brush and coming in more delicately around the face. I'm cutting the face out is how I would describe it. So almost like using a pair of scissors, trying to just gently snip around the edge of the portrait. If I make a mistake at this point, it's pretty disastrous. So I am trying to be careful and take my time, but at the same time the paper's still wet and I don't want it to dry off too much, otherwise I'll get really ugly kind of hard edges. So trying to find the balance between working fast enough that the paper doesn't dry, but not so fast that I make a lot of mistakes. That's the difficulty, that's the real challenge. I mean, I say it like that's the only challenge to painting watercolors. No, there's a bunch of challenges to painting watercolors. It's not a nice medium, but I love it so. Once the picture is finished and completely dried, then I would go over the top and take off some of the extremely hard edges. So again, using a very fine brush and just sort of teasing at the edge between the light area and the dark area, and then just wiping that straight off with a bit of cloth. Oh yeah, I forgot her teeth. Oops. Better do something about the teeth. I mean, this is this sort of refining moment, if you like. This is very much where I go through looking at all the different areas, you know, looking at the nostril, looking at the corners of the mouth, looking at the eyes, looking at all those sort of key features and deciding, have I gone dark enough? Does it have enough shape? This picture is very subtle, and there is actually a lot in this picture that I feel like the artist purposefully kind of left things just implied. Either that, or the reference picture I was looking at was a really poor reproduction, which is also entirely possible. But since I don't have the original hanging in my bedroom, alas, then I have to rely on what it is that I can find and just hope that I can produce a nice picture anyway. We're coming to the final moments now, folks. Oh, what a journey it's been. We started with a blank piece of paper and now we have a whole face. I'm just working on some final tonal shifts and some temperature shifts, so working a little bit darker into certain areas because as they've dried they've gotten lighter, and just making sure that the balance of light and dark is really nice. I think we're almost done. We're almost done. And done! Stop the timer! Click! Oh, 1 hour and 45 minutes! Phew-wee! I was painting super fast that time. Actually, I wasn't. I was painting at my regular speed. But I'm quite happy with the results. It's not 100% finished, but there are important parts that are finished. Her face is finished. Her mouth is finished. She doesn't have any eyebrows. Important, very important stuff. The pearl earring, got that in there. Nice bit of reflection. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. I hope you found it interesting, maybe a little bit instructive, possibly as well. And if you, yes, if you have a particular masterwork that you would like me to do a copy of, please drop me a line. I am taking requests. Not that I don't have my own ideas. No, I definitely do. I have plenty of ideas. So if I don't get any requests, I will just make up my own things. But I also do love a little bit of audience participation. So if you would like to send me a request, I would love to hear it. and I will keep making these videos, and I will keep painting for you, and you will enjoy, and I will enjoy, and we will all have a lovely time together. Oh yeah.